It's safe to say that many of us think about the state of the planet quite frequently. And for once, I don't mean the social unrest part of this world that we live in, but rather the planet we live on. We know taking care of our home is crucial, but where do we even begin? I don't know about you, but for me, sometimes as I learn more, rather than feeling empowered to start and make changes, I feel overwhelmed. Because something that I thought I was doing to help turns out wasn't as eco-friendly as it first appeared. The science of climate change and how we can lessen our impact, particularly as ceramicists and potters who need many materials extracted from this very earth in order to make what we make, is as confusing as, well, science. Which is exactly why I'm so grateful for people like Yuliya Makliuk, a trained ecologist and potter, who recently wrote the book Potters Save the World: Learn to Make Sustainable Ceramics and Help Protect the Earth. Yuliya isn't just passionate about ceramics, but holds a master's degree in ecology with training in the life cycle assessment, which is exactly the system she shares in such an easy-to-understand way in her book. I'm mentioning that repeatedly here, now in the intro, because I think we are all beginning to see just how much greenwashing is out there in the world. And knowing you're getting information from someone who's actually trained in these studies, well, it seems pretty darn important. There's obviously a lot more to learn, so let's dive right in after this quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfield collection of functional ceramic art. The collection exists as an online source for research and inspiration, featuring photos of objects made by over 1,000 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great source for students and teachers. To find out more, visit www.rosenfieldcollection.com. This episode is also sponsored by the Archie Bray clay business, home of Bray Patch, a ceramic patching material that is best used for filling cracks and bonding breaks. Bray Patch can be applied to either green or bisque ware and fired up to cone 10. It fires paper white, but can be tinted using your chosen clay body and be covered by opaque glaze or slip. Order anytime online at archiebrayclay.com. Now, on with the show. Welcome to the Maker's Playbook, the show where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, seasoned entrepreneur of 14 years, Rebecca Ikes Kara. Hey, Yuliya, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Rebecca. So glad to be here with you.
I'm so excited. I was saying just before we hit record, I was so shocked and honored when you emailed me when you were still writing your book to read it ahead of time. I was like, oh, I'm not this person, but thank you. It was such a surreal moment for me. So that's how we kind of initially got connected, I think, right?
Yeah, but actually I have to say you are that person because I've been following you for a long time before daring to contact you. I've listened to some of your podcasts, especially the series about the business of running a studio pottery, and also your advices about photographing and different techniques of, how to make photos and how to promote them.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And now the book is out. But before we're going to get all to that, I'm jumping too far ahead. For people who don't know you, first, let's go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. So my name is Yuliya Makliuk. I'm a self-taught potter and environmentalist, and I live and work in Ukraine. My kind of brand name in pottery is Here and Now Pottery. I produce tableware, also art pieces, and my main focus of my practice is sustainability in pottery, in ceramics. How can we make ceramics while being eco-friendly and responsible? So that's what I'm trying to do.
That's amazing. When did you first get into ceramics?
I think it was 2015, probably, when I started just attending pottery class in my free time. And it quickly escalated. So in
This is like the universal truth for all of us.
Absolutely. And like my next birthday, I bought myself a used pottery wheel. I put it in a living room, and the shit just got crazy and never stopped after that.
What were you doing before that, when it was just like I'll do this for fun?
Yeah. So before that, I was working for environmental NGOs. I was an activist organizer and a campaigner for climate change and other causes. And I was also doing and still doing some environmental management consulting for organizations and for businesses. So I'm helping entrepreneurs to make their business more sustainable, more eco-friendly.
This makes me feel much better to know, because as I was reading your book, I was like, how in the world did you know where to start? Like, there is so much when it comes to being environmentally friendly or sustainable or whatever term is the correct one to use. It's like when we start, then we find out something else, and it kind of sometimes can feel like one step forward, two steps backwards, one step forward, one step backwards, because you've learned more. And so this whole time as I've been reading it, I've just been like, how in the world did you even know where to begin? So this makes me feel much better.
Absolutely. I mean, I clearly do not know everything about sustainability in pottery for sure. And I doubt anyone knows. But yeah, it really helps to have a master's degree, Master of Science degree in ecology, and also like training in the life cycle assessment, which is a method of how ecologists calculate environmental footprint of different products and processes. So yeah, I started from there.
Well, and then also even to have the relationships with other people to help look outside of the tests and the tracking that you were thinking about. I was kind of like, how did you just happen to know, environmental researchers or like all of these things?
Yeah, there's a lot of communications. And what I really like about the ceramic community in particular is that people are so open to exchange, to knowledge exchange, to just chatting, to devoting their time. And I'm so grateful for this. Ceramicists are the best. And environmentalists too. Yeah, these are my two favorite kinds of people.
Not that you're biased at all.
No.
That's fantastic. Well, before we get into the book, and I do want to talk about that life cycle test, because I think that is so important. It's something that, especially in the US at least, gets overlooked, right? Because we are a culture of, buy this Stanley Cup or whatever. And nobody's thinking about right? I mean, it's terrible. And nobody's thinking about well, how was that created? And did that do more damage to bring into the world? And then people are buying 20 of them instead of buying one of them. But I'm getting ahead. Before we get there, walk us from a little bit from community studio, you're taking classes in 2015, to how the heck now it's your full-time gig, right?
Yeah, it's my full-time. It's 24/7. I'm an individual entrepreneur in arts and consulting. I started doing that class, and then almost immediately I started thinking what it would be like to have my own studio one day. This sounds just perfect. And also I grew tired of my old job because it was very emotionally demanding. And I just found myself spending any free time with clay. So I remember one summer I took whatever paid time off I had from my job, which was an international NGO, and also unpaid time off to go for a summer school in the National Museum of Pottery of Ukraine. And they had this awesome opportunity for newbie potters to spend 3 weeks in their museum. And the museum is not just the building, but it's also vast grounds with ceramic sculpture and different types of kilns. And also what is super unique, with old houses of historical potters who used to live in that area. So we would go from house to house, and watch how people lived and how they made pottery and what were the traditions. Yeah, so I spent almost a month one summer there in Opishne. The village is called Opishne. It's in Poltava region in Ukraine, and it was just marvelous. I guess it took me a few years before I actually kind of got enough courage to register as an individual entrepreneur. Thankfully, in Ukraine, it's quite easy, and the taxes and the whole system is, it's doable. You don't need like a specific, knowledge to do that. Yeah, and I gave up all of my jobs and just started doing pottery in a shed, which my husband built for me. It was like tiny, super tiny, 10 square meters. I don't know how many square feet is that, but it's like a bathroom or something in size. And very lovely. It's like this lovely little shed in yellow and with green roof. And yeah, I put my pottery wheel in there and my kiln. There was no running water, no heating, very hot in summer, terribly cold in winter. And I asked a friend to make a logotype for me because obviously that is the most important thing when you're starting your own gig, in exchange for some pottery, for some cups. And I came up with this name, Here and Now Pottery, because at that time I felt that like, this is my sanctuary, this is my like refuge, and I want to be super present and super authentic and, in the moment. I kind of still feel that, but maybe the feelings have developed a little bit now that I'm a full-time.
Developed is a very good verb.
Transformed.
Yeah. Grown. Adjusted.
Now I have a bigger studio. I rent it and I have like an Etsy shop, Instagram with international following. I have been exhibiting in Ukraine and in Europe. What else? Yeah, and I published this book, Potter Saves the World, just recently, which is like a highlight of my journey so far.
Well, it's really everything coming all together to me. It sounds like, this historical career, historical being you left it, but like your knowledge and experience previously blended with this new passion coming together into one thing that really, I think, is a great starting point for people to at least start wrapping their brain around environmentalism for pottery specifically. Because I think there's some things that are obvious for people, like using recyclable packaging materials. That's a quick entry point for some people, but then it's kind of like, okay, and what else? How can we go deeper? And actually, it's funny that you mentioned not having running water in the studio, because we don't either. I mean, ours is attached to our house, so there's obviously running water in our house, but in the studio itself, it's not. And I was thinking the other day, knowing we were going to talk, that I think that's actually the best way to conserve water. Because when I was in a community studio, you didn't have a permanent space. And so every day you were coming in, you were filling up a bucket with fresh water that I could have drank out of, and then starting all over again. Whereas now we have, a bucket that just sits there. We use that dirty water for wiping up, for cleaning, even for throwing. We don't use the dirty water for throwing, but we use the same water for throwing until it gets so slip-based that we could use it to attach handles. But, it does kind of, I think the point I'm trying to get to is the thing that we think of as a limitation when someone's trying to set up their own studio, perhaps, is actually what has helped Francesco and I, at least, be more conscientious about how we're using resources instead of just getting into this habit of, hot, fresh water every time you throw.
Yeah, absolutely. And well done for doing it and for raising this point. Absolutely. Oftentimes, limitations are, prerequisite for creativity and sometimes sustainability, not often, not always, but still. Yeah, when like water can be reused so many times, almost as much as clay, right? In my current studio, I do have running water, thankfully, but still there is the same system with buckets where everything would settle down and I would take the upper water and use it for cleaning, throwing. What else? Mostly cleaning and throwing.
Yeah, you can't use it for glaze. That gets problematic.
I do use it for glaze, but that's because most of my glazes are self-made and they are made of clay. ash, and glaze waste. So if there is a little bit impurity in the water, it doesn't affect anything. In my case, but of course, if like you're using like white glaze, which you don't want to have any spots in it, then that's not going to work for you.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, this was really the interesting thing I found in reading the book was, at least to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, for me it seems like a lot of your ceramic style has now grown out of this commitment, right? There's certain things you can or cannot do if you're saying, I'm going to be committed to this, right? For example, if you did a big shop update and were telling everyone how you did a whole shop load worth of gold luster, I would be like, that's kind of weird.
Yeah. I actually gave up gold. I'm not using it anymore. I mean, the only time I bought like gold luster was several years ago, and I had this little kind of bottle, and I finished it last year, and I'm not gonna buy any new, just because from my research I actually learned how bad gold is for the environment and how in pottery it actually adds so much to the environmental footprint. So if this is one thing I can avoid and I'm not suffering from it, I mean, I can do without gold. It's not like a sacrifice or anything. And it also, you said like the things that I can't do or can do now. And for me, it's also about things I want or don't want to do. For example, I'm using lots of local clays and wild clays. And it's not because I cannot buy from abroad. I still can. But using local clays actually have so much meaning to me, even beyond the transportation of footprint. It is like local history, local geology, these exclusive colors and textures that I could not possibly get out of, this commercial, universally available clay bodies that everyone is using. And it really, I mean, it's good for marketing, but also, but it's also, I love this fact of connection to local territory. It really kind of, for me, it is a pleasure, and I feel that it kind of enriches my making, I guess.
As you were saying that, it made me think about the fact that all of us, or so many of us at least, I shouldn't assume everybody else feels the same way I do, but so many of us talk about trying to create something unique, trying to find our voice, and yet defaulting to everyone having the same materials, the same, maybe not. And so it's interesting because it's just like this aha moment for me of like, how much quicker could you find a unique thing to say when you do turn inwards and you look at your local area and what you can create from that, instead of trying to make something unique or interesting using the exact same materials that thousands of other potters around the country or the world are using. It seems so obvious, right?
Yeah, I mean, for example, I have to say I love Amaco glazes, especially their Pottery Choice line. And they are so easy to work with. Like, you get the exact results. And also they are very good for single firing, which helps to cut emissions, to cut electricity usage. But yeah, because of their predictable results, they all look absolutely the same. And then I open Instagram, where like I follow so many potters on Instagram, and it's like it's the same look, which is fine, which is absolutely fine. And I know, like, I have been enjoying using them, and lots of people do. And also, these commercial materials, standardized, are good for beginners. That's what I have to say, have to admit, because when you are just starting, wild materials have so many factors that you cannot control as a beginner. So it's kind of logical to turn to some standardized, commercially available materials. But then, yeah, I think what happened to me is that I became a little bored with them, I guess. So, for example, just give you another example about the materials. Just recently, I got really into recycling ceramic shards. So, like ceramics that has been fired, it cannot be dissolved. It cannot be used for anything other than mosaics, or maybe in the gardening somewhere. So I really started just hammering it and grinding it and adding it to my ceramic bodies. And just recently I posted on my Instagram like a sneak peek of a little donut vase made with these shards. And it was like the ceramic body was mostly, I don't know, more than 50% of shards and then a little plastic clay to bind them. And it produced this very rough texture with, lots of cavities, and you could see the pieces of ceramics from, the previous piece. And some of the pieces even got like pieces of ornaments, like the patterns, not the ornaments, the patterns from the tablewares they used to be. I enjoyed it so much, and I posted it on Instagram, and it like became virtually one of my most popular posts ever because people liked it so far, because its look is so different and kind of fresh. And it's also sustainable because it's 50% or more of recycled material.
Did you hand build it?
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, how did you work with this? I'm picturing you in thick gloves trying to throw.
No, I mean, it's possible. It's possible. If you grind them really, really fine into powder, then you can mix it and it will be all right. You can wheel throw with it. Of course, it won't be as smooth as like ball clay, but still it's doable.
You're not getting the effect that you would get.
With this project, it was hand built in a plaster mold. Also because the shards were quite sharp. They were not like smoothed in the grinding machine. They were just beaten with a hammer. So we needed to be careful working with them. But yeah, that's getting back to the point of like coming up with your own style and some distinctive looks and shapes and everything. I think experimentation with sustainability really helps with it.
It reminds me of, I forget who I was having this conversation with, but we were talking about the pros and cons of if you have all resources available to you, endless, and you've never been in a situation of whatever materials you want to use, whatever research. I think I was chatting actually with a friend of mine who just moved to the Pacific Northwest, and they accidentally moved to a neighborhood where her son is now going to this like amazing school, right? Families try really hard to get into this school, and they just accidentally moved there. They didn't know. And so she was talking about, this is incredible. He has so much access, but also what's the pro and con to having all of this as opposed to having the limitations that you have to work within and then getting creative around those And so I'm conflating two different topics here, but what I'm hearing from you at least is giving yourself this parameter that you're willing to work within for the sake of sustainability and the environment, and saying, okay, I've learned all of this knowledge, I've researched, so I'm within, this kind of lane. These are the resources I'm going to use. This is how much I'm going to use of them, has really pushed your work to this new, fascinating, really unique pieces coming out now that you wouldn't have otherwise discovered if you weren't saying, how the heck can I reuse these ceramic shards? How many of us have a bucket or a closet full of,
oh my God, that's dark,
shitty ceramics?
Yeah, and I don't have enough friends to give them away, so I have to do something with those shards. My last birthday, I had this fun activity for my guests. I brought several boxes, I guess, of this awful ceramics, even back from the days when I was learning how to throw or something that had defects in them. And I just suggested we break them. Like we will just throw them on a concrete floor and break them. And I assumed it will be like a fun interaction, blah, blah, while the food is being cooked. Yeah, and what turned out is that people actually took about half of the pieces with them. And I'm like, oh my God, you're not taking this. This is awful. I don't want anyone to see it. And they're like, no, it is precious. I will plant my succulents in it or whatever.
That's hilarious. I find it very cathartic. I remember I was in Italy as COVID began, and so we were going through this chaos of, do we leave? How do we leave? What can we do? All of this. And it was like
I want to say the second to last full day that we were there, there's back by the kilns, they had this brick. For the purpose of breaking pots, there was a brick that was just standing vertically in the ground. And we just took some of the stuff and just threw the pots right at this brick wall. And it was, I highly recommend it as cheap therapy for anyone who's needing to get out some stress.
It was great.
Lovely, yeah.
I think maybe only fellow potters can do that.
Actually, I think, a business that offered like a stress relief room where people could come and throw pottery. I don't know whether it worked for long, but at least I saw something like that.
That's hilarious.
Continuing on this very interesting topic of recycling ceramic shards, I currently have like a small project. I'm not sharing it yet, so you would be the first in your audience to hear about that. But that's like a research project. So what I'm doing is that I started with making a small vase, firing it to con 6. Then I broke it and ground it and used this grog or whatever to build the new vase. And then I fired that vase, again broke it. And I'm about to make a third one with the shards. And what I'm trying to understand is that, like, how many times you can recycle ceramics, where something starts to happen after the third firing or the fifth. Or maybe you could do it like endlessly. Probably not. Yeah. But yeah, this is something I'm doing right now. My husband says is like super strange.
I'm fascinated. I think it's interesting.
So far, I have the third vase broken. I have to grind it. So far, so good. Everything goes well. Of course, the grinding is like nasty. It's effort consuming, and I wish I had a ball mill, which I don't. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we'll see. Maybe later I secure some funds and buy it, or I don't know.
That would be one of those interesting things. I'm always thinking of, we have neighbors across the street that we borrow tools from each other for the garden or something like that. And a ball mill is something I feel like if you're in a place with community, with other makers.
Absolutely, yeah.
You don't need that every day. Maybe you're not going to share a singular wheel, but a ball mill could be something where you've got a group of people who are committed to wanting to recycle the materials that say, okay, if we each chip in, it stays in this location because there's enough room, and then everyone can do this because, yeah, if you're hand grinding down pots, that's going to take some time.
Yeah, that's going to take some time. You're absolutely right, and I'd so love to, work in a community of several potters. I'm actually share my current studio with kind of a studio mate who is also doing ceramics, so we do share some tools and some furniture and some, chocolate and cakes and everything, which actually helps, but we still do not own a ball mill and a slab roller, which is another dream.
Oh, yeah. I'd probably vote for on top of my list is a pug mill someday in the future. I would love a pug mill. That's our forever home dream. That is not our current home dream. But before I get totally distracted, I want to talk about the life cycle. And I don't, we're not going to be able to cover everything. That's why you wrote a whole book, and everybody should go buy that book. And I will put the link to buy that book.
Yeah, buy the book.
Right? Please, please, please. It's called Potter Save the World. We're going to repeat that a number of times here so everyone remembers. But just this general concept of what you took in terms of the life cycle. What's the full, remind me the full term.
Yeah. So the life cycle assessment is a scientific tool or method which is used by the ecologists and sustainability practitioners to evaluate the whole environmental footprint of something. It is often used for products and for comparison of products. For example, if you have a product A and product B, and you want to decide whichever would be more eco-friendly. For example, in our case, let's say we are producing 3 types of mugs, and we want to decide which designs to eliminate, maybe because they are too polluting, they have too much of a carbon footprint, and which to stick with. if you are a potter and you don't have like training in ecology and environmental science, it can be overwhelming to try and kind of have a grasp of whatever is more eco-friendly, whatever is more important. Is it the like how much times a mug was fired, for example, in a kiln? Because you can fire once or 2 times or 3 times, depending on your design and your technology. Or is it the glazes that we use? Or is it the packaging that we wrap our products in? So in life cycle, what you do is you kind of draw a diagram of the whole life cycle, all the stages that need to happen in order for this mug to be produced and used by its new owner. So you start with things like raw materials extraction, because obviously to make a mug, you need to have clay, and clay comes from nature. So it is excavated somewhere, and then it is cleaned and mixed, produced in a ceramic body, packaged and shipped to your studio. And this is just one material, right? Because you need like glazes and stains and frites and minerals, all the things. So that would be first stage, then transportation, then the actual production. This is what us potters do, right? We know everything about this process, like with throw or with slip cast or with hand build. What are other methods? These are probably 3 of the main.
I'm sure there's others, but for my brain, you covered them. And
yeah, you like extrude, whatever.
We'll let somebody write us. They can send us a message.
Write in the comments.
You forgot what I did.
What are other methods of mug making? And then you fire it and you paint it. Then what next has to happen? You probably need to sell it somehow. So you either pack them and drive to a craft fair, or you sell them on internet and then you pack them again and you go to the post office, right? So, or maybe you bring it to the exhibition or the auction, whatever. It needs to be sold. It needs to meet their new customer. Then it's transported as a customer, and then customer uses it. If it's a functional piece, right? So what does they do? They probably drink some beverages from it. They wash it occasionally. They dry it maybe. And then eventually, sadly, sometime it breaks after a long period of time, hopefully. And it becomes waste, essentially. And this waste needs to be treated. So it goes somewhere to the landfill, to the recycling. Maybe we don't know where it goes, but it ends somewhere. And this is the whole life cycle, from raw material extraction, production, shipping, usage, and end-of-life utilization. And at each stage, there are some environmental impacts that happen. And the ecologist can assume or can research what is this impact. So if it's clay extraction, there probably will be some landscape degradation, right? Because imagine there was maybe a field or a river bank, and then the excavators come and they dig. So there is a hole, right? And with no plants or animals living there. Also, there is usage of fuel by this machinery, right? So you need some petroleum or gasoline to run the excavation and so forth. So you kind of break down every process, every stage to the environmental factors, basically.
I mean, to the minutia almost, each.
To very small details.
Yeah, exactly. Like a lot of us think about, we think about our impact in our house, maybe, in terms of, I'm only going to fire cone 6 because that takes less energy. Okay, but what materials, raw materials had to go in the clay in the first place for you to fire cone 6, right? Like this has been the interesting conversation Francesco and I have been having is like, okay, we are personally using less energy, but to your point just now with the raw materials, what are the things that got put in that clay? Well, those things had to be excavated, had to be already fired maybe and added to the clay so that we can fire to cone 6. So is it actually more environmentally friendly? The jury's still out. I don't know, because maybe if we fired cone 10, we could buy clay that doesn't have all these extra materials in them. So then you're extracting less things from the earth. And I feel like this one example is probably going to just blow up the internet because people are going to be like, what do you mean cone 6 is bad. I'm like, this is just an example, everybody. Everybody take a deep breath.
Cone 6 is fine. Yeah, I mean, it could be super overwhelming and also very boring. And also you need to have access to specific software and databases to actually be able to kind of translate all these actions into environmental impacts. And this is something that only trained professionals do. So you don't have to. I did it all for you.
Buy the book. This is where we once again remind you to go buy Potter Save the World wherever you get your books.
Yeah, available as a paperback and ebook from Amazon and Etsy. And also maybe from your local bookstore if you are in the USA or UK. You may be able to order from them. So they go to my Amazon and order at the wholesale
I was going
price.
to look and see if I could find it on bookshop.org. That's my favorite suggestion to people to buy books because it's not Amazon, but it still is convenient. You can buy it on the internet, but you can choose your local, you can choose any independent bookstore to effectively buy it from. And then that way they're getting that support. You still have the convenience of buying a book.
Yeah. It's a nice scheme. And it's a whole different part of the conversation about like the publishing model and whether Amazon is good or bad. We could touch upon it a bit later. But I absolutely get your point. I like the bookstore idea. Unfortunately, it doesn't work with the Ukrainian authors at the moment.
Really? Bookshop?
No, and Ingram Spark neither. So I was a little limited in my options. Yeah, it is
and
what
you
it is.
self-published, though. To get into the book itself, I mean, that's an undertaking unto itself, I imagine.
Yeah, because why? I mean, the publishing houses were not approaching me, so I decided why I cannot become my own publisher. It only requires like design, editing, promotion, pre-launch, test printing.
Only.
Fees, bank, this all transactions and everything. So...
Only. No problem. Easy.
Yeah. So what we were talking before that?
We were talking about the life cycle, but when did you start writing the book?
So I had a project idea somewhere at the beginning of last year, 2023, and I applied with it to several foundations because I knew I would need financial support. Because actually doing a research like that and self-publishing is very resource intensive. I mean, I needed to, put aside a lot of time, and also the software and the databases are very expensive. They are restrictively expensive, and I probably would not be able to do it without the foundations. And then, everything, editing and book layout. And self-publishing a book is not like super cost effective endeavor. But it's like a passion project because I wanted to write this book for myself because I was, stumbling upon these questions all the time. Like, what is the most important if I want to make my pots sustainable? Which materials to use? What are some of the other techniques that other potters are using, and blah, blah. And then, of course, I wanted to start or support building this movement of eco-friendly ceramicists and really raise awareness and encourage people to share their findings and to learn from each other and things like that. But it wasn't until summer last year that I actually sat down and made myself writing.
Wait, that's a much shorter period of time to write a book. I mean, I feel like it would be normal for it to take years to write a book. You did this in 6 months?
Actually, writing itself took about 2 months, but that's because I kind of already knew everything that I wanted, or most of what I wanted to say. But the longer part was the research and also the interviews, because this book, it actually has on the cover by Yuliya Makliuk and Potters Around the Globe, because it has up to 20 interviews with different ceramicists from many countries and from different kind of settings. So some are studio potters, some work for large manufacturers, some are researchers, some teach at the universities, and they all share their thinking about what does sustainability in ceramic means, and also their findings, their ideas, their techniques, So kind of securing these interviews, conducting them and transcribing them into text, it was something that really took a large portion of my time, I would say. Yeah, but actually, to be honest, when I just started with this idea, like thinking, oh, maybe I should write a book someday, I started learning from like people who are in self-publishing, who are published authors. And they say like, well, if you want to publish a book, you have to like plan for at least like a year or 2 years in advance just to write and then to prepare everything for publishing. And I'm like, I don't have the time. I want it now. And especially, like, we didn't touch upon this, but one of the factors that kind of speeded me up was the current situation in Ukraine with the ongoing Russian invasion. And like, I'm going to say a sad thing, but it's true for me, so I'm going to share it anyways. Like, when I started writing this book, I didn't know if I would be able to finish it because the situation is so dangerous in here. Like, we have rocket attacks and everything. We have lots of bad things happening. So yeah, so I was like, I don't have 2 years. If I can accomplish it in like half a year, I should do it. And this is something that really helped me to speed up, and which resulted in still having several typos in the book and, some mistakes.
I haven't found them.
Well, I found them, but yeah, they are there. Maybe if our audience is attentive and they already read the book or they will read the book, they can share. I give the permissions of sharing the mistakes and typos in the comments to this podcast. And because I found a few, but I'm sure there are more. So help me edit.
This is why people do like second edition or version. It was just, you were just subconsciously thinking long term.
I'm actually thinking of the second book already.
Thank you for bringing up, where Ukraine still is right now in the world and the invasion, because also I am in total awe of the fact that you have produced this book amidst everything. Because number one, there's no correct term to use. I am clearly not a linguist and I say dumb words all of the time, but in a normal, quote unquote, environment, writing a book is so much work and effort. So to then be able to birth a book into the world while you were also, and not past tense, are also experiencing so much trauma and stress is nothing short of like incredible. Absolutely incredible. I mean, how many people sit around thinking that they want to write a book and don't do anything about it, and they're just like living their everyday Monday through Friday work life? What you've done is fantastic. I hope people are telling you this.
Yeah, thank you so much. It is true. I mean, the full-scale war that started almost precisely 2 years ago, we will have like a second university at the end of February, has changed my life drastically, and of course the lives of all of our people, all of Ukrainians. It's tragic, it's unjust, it has to be stopped. And we are fighting each and at our own place. Many people are in the army, and they are mostly regularly people. They are not, military professionals, just regularly people who went to the army. And many people volunteer to help the army. Many people have been displaced because their homes were destroyed or occupied. Yeah, and then there are like artists who are like me, who are trying to kind of process it all and reflect and maybe offer some, relief or creative view on it or raise awareness. Yeah, so what helped me with the book in this. Yeah, but I have to say that I'm really lucky and privileged because even though my hometown has been occupied at the beginning of the invasion, it also has been freed up quite quickly. So our defenders kicked off the Russian troops from it in a month. Unfortunately, still there was a lot of tragedy and hundreds of my citizens of my town were killed. But after that, the town was rebuilt. And right now, like since then, I'm not on the front line. So like the active combat fight does not happen here. It happens in the eastern and southern part of our country. And Ukraine is quite a large country. I'm privileged. I live in my own house. I continue with my everyday life almost. We do have air alerts, and we do have like the Russians would send rockets and drones on us. So there is still is risk and stress and everything, but it's not as bad. We have electricity and internet almost all of the time. So I'm able to do all these things. Yeah, and actually, if kind of what helped me, why I actually decided to write this book is because when you live in a condition of a constant fear for your life, it works for many people, myself included, that you want to live your life to the fullest, and you understand that you cannot postpone your dreams. This is why, like, many people got married at the beginning of the war, and some got divorced as well.
Dreams are different for everyone.
Priorities. Yeah. And like many people have registered their small businesses. Some started new hobbies and whatever. And for me, it was one of the dreams that I had is to become a published author, because I'm such a bookworm. I mean, I read all the time. I read while eating, while, brushing my teeth, even while hand building some pots sometimes. I would read something on my phone. So like for me, books are everything. I love them almost as much as pots. So I was like, okay, what do I do with the rest of my life? And I'm like, I want to publish a book. And this is something that really helped. And as well, the fellowship that I got from the fellowship was called the Risk Takers. And it is for artists who work with social challenges and like are trying to address different issues through their art. So I was chosen to receive, among others artists, I was chosen to receive such a fellowship. And kind of it allowed me to focus on the book, which was a huge privilege. And I encourage any artist to try and apply for different grants and fellowships. It really helps.
I mean, the grant writing and the fellowships and the applications is like a whole conversation unto itself. I feel like I want to ask questions about that, but I think we have to slate that for part 2 because it's a whole different. I like every once in a while if you get, an NCICA email about something to apply for or something like that, I'll look at it and then I'm just like, I don't even know where to begin. I don't know, does my idea actually apply for this or not? And then the energy to apply, sometimes you're looking at some of these that are, still a significant amount that would be helpful. But at the same time, it's kind of like, well, if I take the next 2 weeks to fill out this application, is this really a meaningful amount of money to move the needle forward? I don't know.
I can totally return to that. I mean, some grants are better, some are worse. But in a nutshell, it is a skill. Applying for funds, it's a skill. It can be learned and practiced, and you can get some funds eventually. And then you have to report, which is another story.
Well, yeah. They do want to know. They want to know what you did with everything, don't they? So annoying. Why can someone just please give us free resources? That would be great. Thank you very much. I do want to touch a little bit, if you're okay with it, because I think it's something a lot of us struggle with in the world, current events, ongoing event. I mean, it's just kind of compounding itself, right? Of so many different ongoing things of where artists can find themselves in that space, because there's some art that's being created that is very clearly directly connected to a social issue. And it's like, yes, art can change culture and culture informs the behaviors we have in the world. And I mean, I think at least, and this is probably a hot take, but I think culture informs more movement in the world than laws and legislation because, to make light of a very heavy subject, Francesco and I joke all the time when we're driving down the highway. In the US, people use all the lanes, right? So there's people in the left lane that really you should only be there if you're passing someone. That is the law. But culturally, we're kind of like, well, we'll just build an 8-lane highway and then you have more and everybody's just everywhere all the time. And it makes for very inefficient driving. Whereas culturally in Italy, you get on the highway, everyone's in the right lane, and they come in the left lane to pass, they get over, and you move on. The law is the same, the culture is different. And so then the behavior is different. And so in my core, I do believe that art informs culture and culture brings us the change that we want in the world. But as someone who doesn't make art that is directly connected to an issue, it is that mental struggle of like, what is my functional mug doing?
Yeah.
How is this getting us closer to what we want?
That's not really a question, but I'm going to let you take it however you want.
I mean, I can talk about this for hours because you expressed it very well, I guess. I struggle with that a lot too. Actually, I think I have like a thing with it already because I'm like every day I'm asking myself, oh my God, what am I doing with all these mugs? The world is on fire. Climate change is getting worse. There is war in my country. There are other conflicts right now, and we know what they are. Like, is it even relevant? But then I still want to play with clay, right? Like doing this research and writing a book and doing the webinars actually helped me to think more about this and also my own experience trying to kind of find this particular kind of way in which my pottery would somehow be connected and hopefully even bring some positive change. So some of the kind of different ways, let's say it's this way, some of the ways, like the easiest, super easy way, if you're especially not an artist, you're not like doing conceptual pieces, but more of a functional potter, is sharing a percentage of your profits with a cause, with an organization that addresses the problems that you're concerned with. And this could be on an ongoing basis. Like, for example, there is this organization or a movement called 1% for Planet, where you register as a small business and then on an ongoing basis, you donate 1% of your, I don't remember whether it's a profit from profits or from the turnaround, but anyways, they are transparent and they tell you where your money goes and they go to environmental projects. And you really can be proud of yourself because you know that you support this renewable energy in rural areas or tree planting or whatever. Or it can be like cause by cause. Like, for example, you can produce a series of mugs or plates or whatever, or vases that would be sold or auctioned or raffled. And the money would go for a particular campaign. For example, like war relief in the Palestine. And this way, you contribute some funds, B, you raise awareness, right? And also what is important kind of business-wise, you attract the audience who shares the same values with you, which is also a good thing. So this is like the financial kind of type of contribute to the right cause. Another is thinking if you can actually create some items that help to address the problem physically. And when speaking about pottery, some of the examples that I mentioned in Potter Save the World are, for example, ceramic travel cups, right? These are just tumblers with lid that people can use and reuse instead of coffee cups, paper coffee cups. And paper coffee cups is another huge problem. They are not only made of paper, they have plastic lining. They're a nightmare to recycle. So like almost every reusable cup would be better than this single use. And it is confirmed by life cycle assessments. And you can read them as they are published in the magazines. Or other examples could be like bird feeders, for example, right? Something that you made out of ceramics, you put seeds in it and you feed local birds and you support biodiversity. Or bird fountains, another popular idea.
Slightly harder than the bird feeder.
Yeah, I've never done a fountain, I have to confess, because you probably need to deal with the pump and a motor or something.
The fittings, the shrinkage.
But there are people who are capable of that.
Right. I might start with a feeder.
Yeah, feeder should be fine for the beginning. Yeah, and there are some other ideas. Maybe like you yourself can sit and think and design. Like, I work with clay. I know how to make things out of clay. can I come up with something that actually helps people live more eco-friendly or something that supports the ecosystem? There are scientists who actually work in collaboration with potters to create artificial habitats for wildlife, like coral reefs,
Cool.
for example. Yeah, like coral reefs are dying because of pollution and climate change. And one of the ways to help them kind of stay alive and to grow back is to make some props, like a surface, textured surface on which like the tiny corals can start growing. And it can be made of ceramics, and it is made of ceramics, and it has proved efficient already. So this is one of the examples. And there are many more, but I think there is like a huge area for creativity here. Maybe there should be a conference or, I don't know, some, workshop where different potters and environmentalists and designers meet, like a hackathon, clayathon, and they will come up with some brilliant ideas. Yeah, so there was financial side of it, and design side of it, and messaging as well. I mean, we could make mugs and write, some messages on them and like, love your planet, recycle your bin, ride your bicycle, or I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, it's actually, I love the idea of the collaboration side because I think sometimes we also get so focused in our own space, and it's really hard to think creatively when you're only thinking within this one little world, right? Like if you think about some of the, I don't know, I don't have a good example to my mind, but a friend of mine who is a very successful business person is always reading or attending conferences or something of tangential industries, right? He's not thinking just about what we do, but is actually thinking, one step outside. And then these creative ideas start coming because it's like, oh, well, this group over here is talking about XYZ, sample A, and I've never even considered that. And now that gives me all sorts of ideas. I think I don't know how we should do a Potterthon, Science-thon, but we should do it.
We should do it. And I have to remind it to myself as well, because I may not sound as it on the postcard, but I am super introverted. And like my normal routine is it like I get up, I go to the studio, and late in the evening, I go back. I do not talk to people. And if I do talk to people, they are potters, and that's it. But then every once in a while, I allow people to convince me to go out somewhere and to meet new people, artists, activists, business people, just regular people. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it actually, it's actually not that bad. And then I have to recharge for a week, but that's fine.
That's fair. Perfect. Well, speaking of meeting new people, I'm also aware of time, and it's much later for you than it is for me, where for the new people on the internet you might like to meet, where would you want to send them? Instagram or the website? I'll link all the things in the show notes.
I do not have a website. I don't have a website. So my primary kind of place on internet is Instagram. I'm Here and Now Pottery on Instagram, and I share some of my pots, obviously, also some tips and findings for my practice in sustainability. So like I said, like how do I recycle ceramics, or how do I recycle glaze waste, how do I fire, things like that. Book updates, public speaking updates, so everything goes there. I'm also on Facebook. It is like the same page, Here and Now Pottery. Find me there if you prefer Facebook. I'm not on TikTok. I'm still, still not there.
Me either. I got the name on there and I started, and then it just made me feel really old. Honestly.
Yeah, maybe we are.
I was like,
maybe we are old. I don't know.
It's all relative, I guess.
Yeah, actually, I've heard from many people, from many expert people, that it's a great place. So I'm not blaming it. I'm just still hesitant to go there. I was super hesitant to start Instagram several years ago. I was like, oh my God, no, I'm not going there. It's just so self-promote. It's all about self-promotion and fake emotions and selfies and blah, blah. And look at me now. I'm like spending many hours every day. creating content. So yeah,
Right.
Instagram, Facebook. I'm also on Behance and Patreon, Etsy, and Amazon, or just Google Here and Now Pottery, and you will find me eventually somewhere.
I imagine that we'll link your Instagram in the show notes, and then I'm guessing if people go to your bio, they'll find all of those places in the link too. We'll send them that way.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Well, thank you for taking so much time. I super appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. You are such a great host. It's been light and really easy talking to you. It makes it so much easier that you are a potter and a creative entrepreneur yourself. Like, I feel we are speaking the same language, which is something I expected, actually, knowing about you from your other podcasts and writings. So thank you so much.
It was so nice to actually make eye contact talking. I think it's really, people forget how important that is because we've been emailing back and forth and whatever, but it's just something, we were just talking about this in the community. Like when we get on a hangout and we look at each other, it's just, even though we're not physically in the same place, it still just makes such a big difference. So awesome. Well, once again, the book is called Potters Save the World. So people can also Google that, or I'll put the link in the show notes to buy it and start. I did want to say, too, it's a very conversational book. So I don't want to scare anyone off because, of course, there's a lot of science and research that you put into it. But it's also written in a way that it just feels like you're having a chat over coffee.
Yeah, thank you. And also, if you're not into numbers, just skip the first chapter when I talk about carbon footprint and just, it has lots of interviews and pictures and diagrams later. So maybe stick to the pictures if that works for you. And it has QR codes to how-to videos, which is also an easier way to learn for many.
Yeah, you've really thought through the varying learning styles of everyone. And I also just think it's obviously specific to pottery, which is great for us for people in control of their studio trying to think through this. But it also gets you thinking about all the things in your life. I mean, okay, I'm not in control of how the microphone in front of me was made, but it just starts getting those ideas going in the back of your brain to say, maybe I need to research this in the future.
Yeah, and then you become a crazy green tree hugger, which is something we all need. So it's a win-win.
Absolutely.
No, just joking.
I love it. I love it. We're going to do the Potterthon with Sciences out in a field somewhere. We'll sing around a campfire. We'll make it super hippie just to lean into the stereotype.
Yeah, why not? I'm all in. Invite me.
Love it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. It's a pleasure.
If all Yuliya has created and done in this last year, amidst some of the scariest and harshest of life realities that I frankly can't even fathom, well, if that's not an inspiration for all of us to go out there and do the darn thing that you have been dreaming about for so long, I don't know what is. To see the joy that talking about working with clay puts on her face is a much-needed reminder that even during the most difficult of times of war and tragedy, grief and uncertainty, creating art, creating beauty, it does really matter. And perhaps as we all continue to be presented with unspeakable horrors throughout the world, realities that I imagine most of us can't even envision, despite it being recorded and shown to us to directly envision. Well, maybe instead of feeling hopeless or lost at how we could possibly make a difference, maybe we could let Yuliya's story be an example of just how much the world needs art to continue, to keep us human, show us the humanity in others that we might assume are so different from us, and most of all, connect us, even if it's through something as simple as feeling the hands of the artisan that made your favorite mug. If this conversation has piqued your interest to dive a little deeper into how you might be able to make your own ceramics practice eco-friendly, then I would encourage you to buy Yuliya's book, Potters Save the World. learn to make sustainable ceramics, and help protect the earth. There's a link for it in the description of this episode on whatever podcast app you're listening to, or come on over to makersplaybook.com/podcast to see all the episode's show notes and more. And as you make changes to your studio space, create something new with a single file process maybe, or even simply update your packaging material, let us know. Tag me at The Maker's Playbook or Yuliya at Here and Now Pottery on Instagram so that we can all celebrate together while we work to protect this universal home of all of ours. Today's episode was made possible in part thanks to our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfield collection of functional ceramic art. The collection exists as an online source for research and inspiration, featuring photos of objects made by over 1,000 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great source for students and teachers. To find out more, visit www.rosenfieldcollection.com. This episode is also sponsored by the Archie Bray clay business, home of Bray Patch, a ceramic patching material that is best used for filling cracks and bonding breaks. Bray Patch can be applied to either green or bisque ware and fired up to cone 10. It fires paper white but can be tinted using your chosen clay body and be covered by opaque glaze or slip. Order anytime online at archiebrayclay.com. Audio post-production of this podcast is made possible by help from Christy Kotzfun, with promotional material assistance from Queenie Maliki. The Maker's Playbook podcast is recorded on the original homelands of the Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee people, where the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. Until next time, my friends, go get back to making your dreams a reality. Because together, we've got this.